Hello everyone. I am Dreaming Stories and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep. So before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. The desert stretched endlessly, a flat and lifeless expanse of sand, rock, and broken horizon. The sun had long since dropped, but even at night the heat clung stubbornly to the earth, radiating off the ground like an unseen breath. Outpost Echo sat in the middle of it all, a cluster of squat, sun-bleached buildings surrounded by a perimeter of chain link and rusting barbed wire. It was small, almost forgotten, just another dot on the military's map of nowhere. Inside the command hut, the only sound was the low hum of the diesel generator out back, and the constant static of the radio. Private Daniel Cole sat slouched in the comms chair, headset crooked across his brow, tapping a pencil against the edge of a half-finished log entry. His eyelids were heavy. Night shift always stretched forever, dragging its weight across the bones. The other men were asleep in the barracks, save for Sergeant Alvarez, who prowled the perimeter like a restless wolf, and Private First Class King, who dozed on a cot near the door with a rifle balanced loosely across his chest. It had been 3 weeks since their deployment to Echo, and not a damn thing had happened. Just routine transmissions, check-ins with Central Command, and the empty silence of the desert. At least until the radio crackled. Cole straightened, frowning as the static bent into something sharper, a burst of distorted syllables slipping through like water under a door. He adjusted the frequency dial, leaning closer. Cole. His spine stiffened. That wasn't possible. The voice wasn't clear, warped, like it had been dragged across gravel, but the name was unmistakable. His name. King. Alvarez. Cole ripped the headset off, heart pounding. Sarge, he called toward the door. Alvarez appeared a few moments later, boots crunching, rifle slung across his shoulder. He was broad-shouldered, weather-beaten, his dark eyes sharp with irritation. What? The radio, Cole said, motioning at the set. Someone's on our channel. Alvarez stepped closer, frowning as the static hissed. For a moment, there was only silence. Then. Outpost Echo, coordinates, North Ridge, follow. The words melted in and out, broken, stretched, but again unmistakable. Alvarez's jaw clenched. Enemy interference, he said flatly. Cole swallowed. Sarge, they knew our names. King stirred from his cot, groggy, rubbing his eyes. What's going on? Nothing, Alvarez snapped. Back to sleep. But King had already caught the tail end of the transmission. He sat upright, pale in the dim light. That didn't sound like any of ours. The radio went dead, static leveling back into nothing. Cole exhaled shakily, glancing at Alvarez. The sergeant didn't speak. He just stared at the set like it had betrayed him. The next morning, the desert sun burned white-hot. Cole kept to the shade of the barracks, but the memory of the voice clung to him like dust in his throat. He couldn't shake the sound of it, the uncanny familiarity, the way it seemed to stretch his name until it wasn't his anymore. At breakfast, King brought it up again, half joking. Maybe the ghosts out here are bored. Alvarez's glare shut him down. You heard nothing. It was interference. That's all. But Corporal Jensen, the medic, leaned forward over his tray, his face thoughtful. You know this place has a history, right? Alvarez's spoon clattered. Don't. Jensen smirked, ignoring him. 2 years ago, a whole squad went missing. Supposedly. Official report said sandstorm, but, he lowered his voice. The locals say Echo's cursed. That men disappear out in the dunes. That something calls to them. Cole shifted uncomfortably. Alvarez slammed a hand on the table. Enough. We don't spread rumors. This is a post, not a campfire. The others fell silent, though the unease remained. That night, the voices returned. Cole had half hoped, half feared it. He was alone in the hut again, the others asleep. The static trembled, and then the words slid through, rough and warped, but clearer this time. Cole. King. Alvarez. Jensen. Cole's blood ran cold. All their names now. Coordinates, 21 north, 4 east, come. His pencil rolled off the desk as he scribbled the numbers on the logbook. He didn't know why. He just did. Then, something new. Not command, not command. The hair on his arms rose. He shoved back from the desk and stormed into the barracks, shaking Alvarez awake. Sarge, it's happening again. You need to hear this. Alvarez cursed, dragged himself up, and followed. By the time they reached the hut, the transmission was gone, static back to silence. But the coordinates glared up from the page where Cole had written them. Alvarez stared down, jaw tight. Then, without a word, he tore the page free and stuffed it into his pocket. Forget this, he growled. But Cole knew he wouldn't. He'd seen the flicker in the sergeant's eyes, something between fear and recognition. The next evening, against regulation, Alvarez led a small team into the dunes. Cole went, along with King and Jensen. They walked in silence, rifles slung, the desert wind cutting sharp through the night air. The stars were harsh and bright above, and every step crunched against the brittle sand. After an hour, they reached the ridge marked by the coordinates. It was nothing. Just a scar of rock jutting from the earth, half buried in sand. But then Cole saw it, half hidden behind a collapsed dune. A radio tower. It was old, rusted, its metal eaten by years of sand and heat. Wires hung like veins from its skeleton, and at its base, a bunker door sagged open, throat-like. King whispered, "No way." Jensen stepped closer, shining his flashlight. The inside was dark, descending. Cole's pulse thundered. He didn't want to go down there. Every nerve screamed no. But Alvarez was already moving, rifle in hand, expression set. Let's see who's been talking to us. And with that, they descended into the dark. The stairwell reeked of rust and dust. Their boots crunched on gravel that had sloughed in through the doorway, and each step down groaned with the weight of their descent. Cole's flashlight beam skimmed across the walls, concrete, chipped and scarred, water stains running down like veins. Someone had built this place long ago, buried it deep enough to hide, but not deep enough to escape time. The air grew cooler as they descended, the silence pressing in so tightly that even the sound of their own breaths seemed wrong. Place looks abandoned, Jensen muttered, though his voice carried uneasily, as if the walls listened. Stay sharp, Alvarez ordered. He moved first, rifle raised, each step deliberate. The stairwell emptied into a narrow corridor. Exposed wires hung loose from the ceiling like cobwebs. On one side, a row of doors, steel, most rusted shut, others ajar. On the other side, more stains. Long, streaking stains that trailed downward. Cole's flashlight caught them and lingered, his stomach tightening. King saw it too. That's blood, right? No, Alvarez snapped quickly. Too quickly. Paint. Old paint. But none of them believed that. They pressed on. At the end of the corridor lay the comms room. Cole knew it before they entered, the low hum of static seeped out beneath the half-open door, faint but unmistakable. He froze, heart pounding in his throat. Alvarez pushed the door wider with the barrel of his rifle. Inside, the room was a graveyard of machines. Radio sets lined the walls, ancient, coated in dust, most broken and gutted. Antennas leaned at odd angles, half-snapped. But one set was alive. A single unit, humming, lights flickering, though the power cables were severed. "Christ," Jensen whispered. "How the hell is it running?" Cole's throat went dry. He stepped closer despite himself, drawn in, staring at the dials glowing faint green, the static rolling out like breath. And then the voices came. Cole. Jensen. King. Alvarez. All four of them, spoken in turn, the syllables warped but undeniable. King stumbled back. Nope, I'm done." Alvarez cut him off with a sharp gesture. His jaw was locked, knuckles white on his rifle. "Who's there?" he barked at the set. "Identify yourself." The radio crackled. Not command, follow." The voice fractured, multiplied, like a dozen mouths speaking at once through one throat. Cole felt something cold crawl down his spine. "It knows we're here." The lights on the radio flickered harder, fast pulses like a heartbeat. Then. "Door, open the door, follow." A grinding sound echoed from deeper in the bunker, metallic and heavy. Alvarez whipped around, rifle raised. The corridor behind them shuddered faintly as though something had shifted in the foundations. "What door?" King hissed. "What the hell are they talking about?" Cole's flashlight beam landed on a hatch in the floor at the far end of the comms room. Heavy, bolted shut, except now, as they watched, the bolts were sliding back with slow, deliberate clicks. 1. 2. 3. The final bolt clanged free. The hatch yawned open. A cold draft hissed up from below, smelling of metal and something sour. "Nope," King said again, voice high and tight. "That's it. We're leaving. This is some freak show shit." But Alvarez didn't move. His gaze was fixed on the dark mouth of the hatch. "They called us here," he said, almost to himself. "They knew our names. How the hell do they know?" Cole reached for him. "Sarge, we shouldn't. You know we shouldn't." But Alvarez tore his arm free, knelt, and aimed his rifle downward. The beam of his flashlight cut into the dark, revealing only a second ladder descending into blackness. Without another word, he started down. "Jesus Christ," Jensen muttered, but followed. King looked at Cole, eyes wide. "We're gonna die down there." Cole hesitated, every instinct screaming to turn and run, to never look back. But his feet betrayed him. He climbed after the others. The lower level was worse. The air was damp, metallic, thick with something that clung to the back of the throat. Their lights cut through the dark to reveal a wider chamber, half collapsed. Broken crates lined the walls, rotted documents scattered like brittle leaves across the floor. In the center, a large table covered in radios, maps, and bones. Human bones, yellowed, some still wrapped in tattered uniforms. Jensen swore under his breath. King gagged, turning away. Alvarez's face hardened, but he didn't look surprised. That unsettled Cole most of all. "They're ours," Alvarez said grimly. He reached for one of the dog tags hanging off a ribcage, wiped the dust clean. The name stamped there was faded but legible. Sergeant Paul Rivas, Alvarez read. Echo Squad. Missing in action, 2022. Jensen's jaw dropped. The squad that vanished. Before he could finish, the radios on the table all flared to life at once, static erupting, voices overlapping, a storm of sound. "Help us, follow, door, not command." The words tumbled over one another, rising in volume until the chamber shook with them. Cole clapped his hands over his ears, but the voices burrowed inside anyway, vibrating through his bones. And beneath the noise, one voice pushed clearer, sharper, as if speaking directly into his skull. "Cole. You opened the way." His knees buckled. The flashlight clattered to the floor, beam swinging wildly across the chamber, until it caught something moving in the shadows beyond the table. Something tall. Something wrong. Its shape was human only in suggestion, stretched and warped, bones bending where they shouldn't, a silhouette made of shifting static and shadow. Cole gasped. "Sarge." Alvarez swung his rifle toward it, finger tightening on the trigger. The thing moved, faster than anything should. The lights went out. Darkness swallowed them whole. The kind that wasn't just an absence of light, but a living thing pressing against the eyes, suffocating. Cole froze, heart slamming against his ribs. He could hear the ragged breaths of the others, the scrape of boots shifting on the concrete floor, the static still bleeding from the radios like a pulse that never ended. "Flashlights. Get your lights back on." Alvarez barked. Cole fumbled in the dark, hands shaking as he snatched up his dropped flashlight. His thumb clicked the switch, nothing. Dead. I can't get mine," King stammered somewhere to his left. "Mine's out too," Jensen said, voice tight. Only Alvarez's light flickered weakly to life, casting a thin, trembling cone across the chamber. It wasn't enough. Shadows loomed larger than life, twitching with every movement of the beam. "Stay close," Alvarez ordered, his voice clipped but taut with something Cole had never heard before, fear. Then came the sound. From the far corner of the room, a scrape, slow and deliberate, like claws dragging across concrete. It was followed by a wet, rattling breath. Cole's stomach dropped. He couldn't see it, God, he didn't want to, but he knew the thing was still here. The radios flared again, louder, overlapping voices crashing like waves. "Follow. Stay. Not command. Echo. Echo. Shut it off." King shouted, desperation cracking his voice. "Turn them off, turn them off." But Alvarez ignored him, his light fixed on the far wall where the scrape had come from. "Who's there?" Alvarez demanded, voice rough. His rifle aimed dead center. "Show yourself." The static bent in reply. And then, "Alvarez." The voice was clean this time. Too clean. A perfect replica of his own mother's voice, lilting, warm, coaxing. Alvarez stiffened. Cole saw his jaw clench, saw his knuckles whiten on the rifle. "No," he muttered under his breath. "No, you're not her." But the voice came again, softer now, like a whisper right at his ear. "Come home, hijo, come home." Alvarez staggered back a step, shaking his head violently. Jensen grabbed his arm. "Sarge, it's not real, don't listen." The light swept sideways, catching a shape only for a split second before it skittered back into the dark. It was wrong, too long, too thin, its edges fuzzing like bad reception. Cole felt bile crawl up his throat. "Sarge, we have to go. Now." But Alvarez didn't move. His face was pale, sweating, caught between rage and longing. Then the thing spoke again. This time in Jensen's voice. "Medic. Help us." Jensen froze, every muscle locking tight. What the hell?" The entity stepped closer, into the edge of Alvarez's failing beam. It was taller than a man, but twisted, its limbs flickering in and out like half-formed shadows. Where its face should have been, there was only static, white noise given shape, shifting features that never settled. And yet when it opened its mouth, voices poured out. Familiar ones. Jensen's. King's. Even Cole's. "Help us, stay, follow." King screamed and fired. The muzzle flash lit the chamber like lightning. The bullets ripped through the thing, but instead of tearing flesh, they seemed to pass through waves of distortion. The figure convulsed, flickered, then split into two silhouettes for a moment before reforming. The radios exploded with shrieking static. "Run!" Alvarez roared. Cole didn't need telling twice. He sprinted toward the ladder, boots slipping on the dust-slick floor. King scrambled after him, nearly tripping over scattered bones. Behind them, the thing moved, too fast, too fluid. It closed the distance in an instant, its distorted arm lashing out. Jensen screamed as it hooked around his leg, dragging him back. "Help!" Jensen's voice cracked, raw. He clawed at the floor, nails peeling, but the creature dragged him with terrifying strength toward the shadows. Alvarez swung his rifle, unloading round after round, each shot deafening in the tight chamber. "Let him go, you bastard!" But the thing only shrieked, an unholy blend of radio static and Jensen's own voice crying in stereo. With one final yank, it pulled Jensen into the dark, his screams cut off like a switch thrown. "Jensen!" Cole shouted, frozen in horror at the base of the ladder. "Move!" Alvarez bellowed, shoving him upward. "Now!" Cole scrambled up, lungs burning, King right behind him. Alvarez followed, last up, firing blindly into the black until the clip ran dry. They burst into the upper comms room, slamming the hatch shut behind them. Alvarez jammed one of the steel chairs through the handle, wedging it tight. The radio in the corner still hummed, faint and steady, like it had been watching all along. No one spoke. They stood in silence, chests heaving, sweat soaking through their uniforms. Jensen was gone. Just like that. And then the radio whispered, soft as breath. "Jensen, follow." Cole's knees buckled. He wanted to vomit. King pressed his hands to his head, pacing in tight circles. "No, no, no, that's impossible. That thing, what the hell was that thing?" Alvarez didn't answer. His face was stone, but his eyes were wild. Cole stared at him, realization creeping cold into his gut. "You knew," Cole said hoarsely. "Didn't you? You knew something was down here." Alvarez didn't deny it. He just stared at the glowing dials of the radio, his silence heavier than any confession. And then the set flared again. Outpost Echo, more to follow. The desert night was silent when they returned to the surface, but to Cole it no longer felt like silence. It felt like something listening. The outpost sat in the same stillness it always had, low buildings hunched against the sand, antenna towers creaking faintly in the wind, but everything seemed wrong, tilted, fragile. There were 3 of them now. Alvarez stalked ahead, rifle slung but jaw tight, shoulders rigid. King lagged behind, muttering under his breath, his hands shaking so badly he could barely keep hold of his weapon. Cole trailed in the middle, numb, his brain replaying Jensen's scream over and over. The sound of nails dragging across concrete. The static swallowing him whole. When they reached the barracks, Cole sat heavily on his bunk, staring at the floorboards. The smell of sweat, diesel, and dust pressed around him like a coffin. King broke first. "We can't stay here," he said, voice high and thin. "Whatever the hell that thing was, it's coming back. You saw what it did to Jensen. It's not, Jesus, it's not even real. We need evac. We need to get the hell out of here." Alvarez dropped onto the edge of his cot, unlaced his boots with rough jerks, and said nothing. King spun on him. "Sarge. Did you hear me? We have to leave." "We can't," Alvarez muttered. Cole blinked. "What do you mean we can't?" Alvarez finally looked up. His face was pale beneath the desert tan, eyes sunken, but his voice carried iron. "We're off grid. Command won't send a bird for a broken radio report. They'll want confirmation, proof. And if we abandon Echo without orders, we'll be listed as deserters. King let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Deserters? After what just happened? You're worried about protocol. Alvarez's glare snapped up, sharp as a blade. I'm worried about survival. You think whatever's down there will stop at Jensen? You think it won't follow us across the sand, pick us off one by one? Out there, we're just meat. Here, at least we've got walls, guns, and power. Cole swallowed. So what's your plan? Alvarez's silence stretched, heavy and unbearable. Finally, he said, we hold the outpost. We wait for morning. Then we call it in. King looked like he wanted to scream, but instead he sank into his bunk, muttering curses. Cole just sat there, staring at his boots, Jensen's face flashing in his mind. Sleep was impossible. Cole lay in the dark, every creak of the barracks would like footsteps. Every gust of wind like static crawling under the door. He drifted in and out of half-dreams, Jensen's voice whispering his name, the thing's shape flickering in the corner of his eye. When the radio flared again, he thought at first it was just another nightmare. But the sound didn't stop. He bolted upright, heart hammering. Across the room, Alvarez was already awake, sitting on his bunk, staring at the door. The radio in the command hut screeched, faint through the thin walls. Cole. King. Alvarez. King groaned, clutching his head. Not again, not again, not again. Cole looked at Alvarez. What do we do? Alvarez stood, grabbed his rifle. We listen. The three of them crowded into the command hut. The radio pulsed with life, its dials glowing sickly green. Static hissed, bending, breaking into words. Follow. Echo, next, north. Then a pause. The static softened, as if drawing in breath. Jensen. Cole's chest clenched. The voice was his. Jensen's voice, clean and whole, cutting through the static like he was standing right outside the door. Help me. Please. I'm still here. King shook his head violently. No. No, that's not him. That's not him. But the voice came again, weaker now, cracking like glass. Cole, don't leave me. I'm cold. Cole's throat closed. Every instinct screamed it was a trap, but his heart ached at the sound. Alvarez leaned over the set, his face unreadable. Where are you? The reply came instantly. North Ridge, coordinates, 23 north, 7 east, hurry. The radio cut off. Silence pressed in heavy and absolute. King rounded on Alvarez. You're not seriously considering this. It killed him, Sarge. You saw it drag him down. But Alvarez's jaw was set. We don't know that. You heard him. He's alive. No, King snapped, voice breaking. That's what it wants us to think. It's playing with us. Cole stood frozen, torn between them, Jensen's voice still echoing in his skull. Alvarez shouldered his rifle. We move at dawn. The sun rose like fire over the desert, painting the dunes in gold and crimson. Heat shimmered already, waves rising off the sand. Cole trudged after Alvarez and King, sweat clinging to his neck, every step heavier than the last. The coordinates led them deeper into the barren expanse. No landmarks, no cover. Just endless horizon. After 2 hours, they found it. Half buried in the sand, jagged metal jutted up like bones. A wreck. Old, rust-eaten, the remains of a downed helicopter. Its insignia was nearly faded away, but Cole could just make out the stenciled letters, U.S. Army. King swore softly. No way. They approached cautiously, rifles raised. The hull was torn open, its insides gutted and scorched. Skeletons still strapped in their seats, helmets cracked, uniforms shredded. The wind whistled through the twisted frame, carrying with it the faint smell of decay that should have long since faded. Then the radio in Alvarez's pack hissed to life. Cold. The voice was Jensen's again. But this time it wasn't weak. It was right behind them. Cole spun, rifle raised, heart seizing. And there he was. Jensen. Standing in the sand, uniform torn, eyes hollow. His skin was gray, stretched tight over bone, lips cracked and bleeding. But it was him. Help me, Jensen rasped. King screamed, firing wildly. Bullets tore through Jensen's chest, kicking up sand behind him. He staggered, holes opening across his torso, but no blood came. His mouth peeled into a smile that wasn't his. Not command, Jensen's voice echoed, warped and doubled, spilling out from both his mouth and the radio at once. Cole's stomach dropped as the static swelled again, filling the desert. From the wreckage, the shadows began to move. Shapes rising. Shapes that had been dead for decades. They rose slowly, unnaturally, like puppets pulled upright on invisible strings. Skeletons in rotted uniforms, fragments of helmets sliding from their skulls, sand cascading off their bones as they lurched free from the wreckage. Their jaws gaped open, but no sound came. From their throats. The sound came from the radio, an overlapping chorus of static and distorted voices that filled the air like a storm. Cole's breath locked in his chest. There were 5, 6, maybe more. Soldiers long dead, their tags still clinking faintly on rusted chains. They staggered forward with jerks too sharp, movements out of sync with the desert wind, their sockets dark but fixed on the 3 living men. Open fire. Alvarez roared. Cole raised his rifle, hands trembling, and squeezed the trigger. Muzzle flash lit the sand, bullets shredding through ribcages, skulls exploding into fragments. But the things didn't stop. The remains crumbled, collapsed, and then flickered, like bad reception, before reforming, the missing pieces sliding back into place as though time itself rewound for them. King screamed, firing in a panic, rounds ripping holes into 2 of them. They staggered but kept coming, their bones knitting back together with sickening cracks. This isn't working. Cole shouted, voice breaking. Keep them back. Alvarez barked, even as his clip ran dry. He jammed another magazine in with shaking hands, sweat streaking his dirt-stained face. Then Jensen, or what wore Jensen's skin, stepped forward, calm in the chaos. Bullets tore through his torso, punching holes in gray flesh, but he didn't flinch. He only tilted his head, that hollow smile stretching wider. Cole, the voice rasped, doubled with static. Why are you shooting at me? I thought you were my friend. Cole's hands froze on his rifle. The sound was too perfect. Jensen's voice, the same cadence, the same strained humor he'd used back in the barracks on quiet nights. Behind the creature, one of the skeletons lunged, reaching with bony fingers like claws. Alvarez grabbed Cole by the collar and yanked him back just in time. Snap out of it. Alvarez bellowed, firing point blank into the skull until it shattered. For a moment, the thing collapsed into dust. Then the wind shifted, and its shape flickered back into being, whole once more. King dropped his rifle and bolted. I'm not dying out here. I'm not dying out here. King, get back here. Alvarez roared, but the private was already sprinting across the sand, stumbling over the dunes. Jensen's thing turned its hollow eyes toward the fleeing soldier. The radio in Alvarez's pack shrieked with static, and then a perfect copy of King's voice came out. Help me. Cole watched in horror as 3 of the skeletons broke off and moved with unnatural speed after him. Their jerky gait turned into a full sprint, faster than any human could run. "Jesus Christ," Cole whispered. Alvarez grabbed his arm. "We can't help him. We fall back." They retreated, backing toward the ridge, firing as they moved. The Jensen thing didn't rush them. It just stood among the wreckage, smiling with that torn face, watching them run. Its voice carried after them, low and steady. "Echo. Echo, you'll never leave." They didn't stop running until the outpost was in sight, the chain-link fence wavering in the heat haze. Cole collapsed against the gate, chest burning, lungs scraping raw. Alvarez bent over, hands on his knees, drenched in sweat. Behind them, there was no sign of King. Cole's voice cracked. We left him." Alvarez said nothing. His silence was heavier than any answer. That night, the outpost felt smaller. The generator hummed weakly, the air inside the barracks suffocating. Alvarez sat at the comms desk, staring at the dead radio, his rifle leaning against the chair. Cole lay awake in his bunk, staring at the ceiling. The silence didn't last. The radio hissed alive again. At first, only static. Then King's voice. Clear, desperate. "Please, let me in. It's cold out here." Cole sat bolt upright, bile rising in his throat. Alvarez's jaw tightened. He turned the volume down, but the voice kept bleeding through. "Cole. Alvarez, open the door." Cole's hands trembled. "Sarge, that's not him. It's not him." Alvarez didn't answer. Then came a new sound. Knocking. 3 sharp raps against the outpost's front gate. Cole froze. He could see the door through the barracks window, moonlight gleaming off the chain link. A shape stood just outside. A man. "Jesus Christ," Cole whispered. "That's King." The figure pressed closer to the fence. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle, bones jutting wrong beneath stretched skin. And yet the voice was perfect. "Let me in, Cole. Please. Don't leave me out here." The radio echoed the same words in perfect sync, voice doubled. Alvarez stood slowly, rifle in hand, but his hands shook. "Back away from the door," he shouted. The figure didn't move. Its head twitched, body flickering faintly, like a TV signal breaking. Not command, it rasped. "Follow." Then it vanished. One moment it was pressed against the gate, the next it was gone, swallowed by the desert night. The knocking stopped. But the radio didn't. It hummed and whispered, looping the same phrase again and again. "You'll never leave, you'll never leave." Cole pressed his hands over his ears, but it didn't matter. The words were inside him now. By morning, neither of them had slept. Cole sat hunched in the corner, eyes bloodshot, rifle across his lap. Alvarez still occupied the comms desk, his face gaunt, shadows carved beneath his eyes. The desert outside was still, unbearably bright. But Cole felt the truth in his bones. They weren't alone anymore. And they never would be again. The day dragged like a dying animal, every hour a slow bleed of heat and silence. Cole couldn't bring himself to eat, the emery sat half open on the desk, untouched, the smell of powdered eggs and chemicals souring his stomach. Alvarez paced the perimeter like a caged beast, rifle slung across his chest, eyes flicking to the dunes as if expecting something to rise out of them at any second. Cole sat in the shade of the barracks, staring at the endless horizon. The desert stretched flat in every direction, shimmering with heat mirages, but now it felt alive, watching, waiting. When the radio hissed again in the late afternoon, neither of them moved at first. They just listened, both already hollowed out. Cole. The voice was Jensen's. Not distorted now, not broken by static. It was clear, human, pleading. Please. Help me. They've got me in the dark. Cole's chest tightened. He clenched his fists. It's not him, he muttered to himself. It's not him. But the voice cracked, desperate. Don't leave me here, man. Don't let them take me. Alvarez slammed a fist against the desk. Enough, he barked at the set. You're not him. You're not Jensen. The reply came instantly. Alvarez. This time it was softer. A woman's voice. Warm. Familiar. Alvarez froze. Mama? Cole's eyes snapped to him. Sarge. But Alvarez was already leaning closer, staring at the dials like they were a window. His face twisted, torn between rage and longing. The voice came again, soothing now. Come home, Iho, no more fighting. No more desert. Just come home. Alvarez's hands shook. He ripped the headset off the desk and jammed it over his ears. Where are you? He whispered hoarsely. Where? Cole lunged forward, yanking the headset free. Stop it. That's not her. Alvarez shoved him back hard, his face twisted with fury. For a moment, Cole thought the sergeant might hit him. But Alvarez just turned away, running a hand down his face. Don't you ever tell me what's real, he muttered, voice low and ragged. Cole's heart hammered. He wanted to argue, wanted to scream that the voices were poison, that they weren't human, but the truth was, part of him wanted to believe too. That night, the desert answered. The first knock came just after midnight. 3 sharp raps on the outpost gate, the exact rhythm they'd heard before. Cole sat up instantly, rifle in hand, breath caught in his throat. Alvarez was already at the window, staring out. The shape was there again. King. Or what wore his body? It stood at the gate, motionless, head cocked at a broken angle. Please, it said, Jensen's voice spilling from its mouth this time. It's cold. Let me in. Cole's blood turned to ice. The radio flared to life in the hut, repeating the same words in perfect sync. Please. It's cold. Let me in. The voice shifted suddenly, becoming Alvarez's mother's again. Mijo, open the door. Alvarez's knuckles whitened on the window ledge. His breath came in short, sharp bursts. Don't, Cole whispered. Sarge, please don't. But Alvarez's jaw was set, his eyes glassy. He grabbed his rifle and stalked toward the door. Cole's panic spiked. Alvarez, that's not them. The sergeant didn't stop. He unlatched the heavy bolt on the outpost steel door. Cole rushed forward, slamming his body against it. No. Alvarez rounded on him, fury blazing in his eyes. Stand down, Private. For a heartbeat, they just stared at each other, both trembling, both exhausted, both afraid. Then the knocking came again, louder now, pounding like fists trying to break through. Alvarez shoved Cole aside and ripped the door open. Moonlight spilled in. The figure stepped through. It was King this time, uniform torn, skin gray and splitting at the seams. His eyes were gone, sockets empty, but he smiled anyway. Thanks, Sarge, he rasped, voice doubled by the radio. Cole screamed, raising his rifle, but Alvarez didn't move. He stood frozen, like a man sleepwalking, as the thing reached for him with long, broken fingers. Cole fired. The bullet slammed into its chest, knocking it back a step. The thing shrieked, a chorus of voices exploding from its mouth, the sound so loud it rattled the walls. The radios in the hut all lit up at once, their dials glowing green, static flooding the air. More voices poured out, dozens now. Names, please, commands. Cole. Alvarez, follow, follow. Outside the gate, shapes began to gather. Dark silhouettes rising out of the dunes, one by one, until the horizon was lined with them. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. All standing. All watching. The chorus of voices rose higher, overlapping until it was impossible to tell one from another. Cole backed into the corner of the hut, rifle shaking in his hands, eyes wide. Jesus Christ, we're surrounded. Alvarez finally blinked, snapping out of his trance. His face twisted with horror as he took in the sight outside the gate. The dead of Echo. All of them. And they were waiting. The pounding began at once. The first strike rattled the corrugated steel of the gate so violently that Cole thought it would buckle. Then came another, and another, until the whole outpost seemed to shake with the rhythm of the dead. Tum. 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 The voices from the radios rose in pitch, overlapping into a single, jagged wall of noise. The sound clawed through Cole's skull, vibrating in his teeth. He pressed his palms against his ears, but it made no difference. The noise wasn't just heard, it was inside him. Alvarez slammed the steel door shut again, dragging the heavy bar across it. His chest heaved with panic. They're not getting in. The gate groaned as another blow landed, harder this time. The fence rattled, barbed wire trembling under the weight of bodies pressing against it. Shadows flickered in the moonlight, swarming like a tide. Cole's voice broke. There's too many. Alvarez's eyes blazed. Then we make them pay for every inch. They fought like men already buried. Cole and Alvarez took turns at the windows, rifles spitting fire into the night. The muzzle flashes lit the dunes in harsh staccato, faces half-formed from static, bones dragging themselves upright, Jensen's twisted grin appearing again and again in the swarm. Every time they cut one down, another flickered back into being, reassembling out of dust and shadow. The air reeked of gunpowder and sweat, but the tide didn't thin. One of them reached the fence and climbed. Its body bent backward at impossible angles, arms jerking like a marionette. Cole squeezed the trigger, blasting it off the wire. It collapsed into sand, only to flicker upright again at the base, climbing once more. Shit! They don't stop. Cole shouted. Then neither do we. Alvarez barked, though his face was pale, his eyes bloodshot. They kept firing. Kept burning through magazines. But the dead pressed closer, clawing at the gate now, bones scraping against steel, voices screaming through the radios in perfect sync. Let us in. Let us in. Let us in. The first breach came just before dawn. The bar across the door snapped with a metallic crack, the steel bending inward. Alvarez shoved his shoulder against it, teeth bared, trying to hold it shut. Cole. Reinforce it. Cole grabbed one of the bunks, dragging it across the floor, wedging it against the doorframe. The wood splintered as something slammed into it from outside. Dust fell from the ceiling with each blow. Then, without warning, the radios cut off. Silence. Cole froze, chest heaving, sweat dripping down his temple. Alvarez's breathing was ragged. Why'd they stop? The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. The only sound was the faint creak of the gate outside. Then came a new voice. Not broken. Not distorted. Not even doubled. It was Jensen's. Clear as day. Cole. Alvarez. Open the door. Please. It's just me. Cole's stomach nodded. No. No, that's not him. Alvarez's face twisted, torn in two directions. His lips trembled. What if it is? What if? The voice came again, softer, pleading. I'm hurt. They left me out here. Please. I don't want to die alone. Cole's eyes burned. He already did, Sarge. You saw it. But Alvarez was shaking his head, hand drifting toward the latch again. Cole raised his rifle. Don't. His voice cracked, but he forced the words out. Don't open that door. For a long moment, Alvarez just stared at him, chest heaving, torn between command and desperation. Then the banging returned. Louder. Harder. The gate groaned, metal screaming as it began to tear from its hinges. And above it all, the voices rose again, hundreds now, layered into a single, impossible chorus that made the walls shake. Outpost Echo. You'll never leave. The gate buckled. The dead were coming in. The final stand began with fire. Alvarez dragged the fuel cans from the generator shed, ripping one open, sloshing gasoline across the sand outside the hut. His hands were wild, frantic, but his eyes were cold. Cole watched, horrified. Sarge, you'll torch the whole outpost. They want in. Alvarez snarled. Then let them burn for it. The first skeleton clambered through the twisted gap in the fence, its jaw hanging loose, sockets glowing faint green with radiolite. Alvarez lit a flare and hurled it onto the gasoline-soaked sand. The desert ignited. Flames roared up in a wall, consuming the first wave. The shrieks that followed weren't human, the static became screams, broken, jagged, tearing through the air like feedback. Shapes twisted in the fire, flickering like broken signals before collapsing into ash. For a moment, the tide faltered. The firelight reflected in Alvarez's wild eyes. You see that? We can kill them. But Cole wasn't so sure. In the distance, beyond the flames, more silhouettes gathered. Hundreds more. Their forms rippled, shifting, growing taller, wider, merging into shapes too large to be men. And through the static, a deeper voice rolled, something vast, resonant, vibrating through the ground itself. Echo. Open the door. Cole's blood turned cold. That voice wasn't Jensen. It wasn't King. It wasn't anything human. It was something older. Something that had been here long before Outpost Echo was ever built. And it was done waiting. The walls shook as though gripped by a giant's hand. Cole staggered, grabbing the edge of the desk for balance, eyes wide. The roar of the flames outside was drowned beneath that voice, so deep it vibrated in his chest cavity, rattled his bones. The radios on the desk lit up one by one, their dials glowing sickly green, needles twitching wildly. Echo, the voice boomed, layered, endless. Open. The steel gate, half torn already, ripped free with a shriek of tortured metal. The fence crumpled inward under the weight of the tide. Shadows spilled across the sand, figures jerking and twitching as though pulled forward on invisible strings. Skeletons, corpses, half-formed shapes of static and ash, all moving as one. The outpost was no longer a fortress. It was a coffin. Alvarez stood in the doorway, rifle braced tight against his shoulder, teeth bared. Hold the line, he bellowed, though his voice cracked under the roar. Cole's body moved without thought. He took the opposite window, sighted down the barrel, and fired into the tide. Each burst dropped one of the figures, but they flickered and reformed, dragging themselves upright again. The fire slowed them, twisted them into blackened silhouettes, but it didn't stop them. They were infinite. The first one through the perimeter was King. Or what was left of him. His skin was gray and burned, flesh bubbling from the flames, but his grin remained, stretched wide and wrong. His voice poured through the radio in sync with his mouth, warped but perfect. Cole. Don't shoot. It's me. I'm okay. Cole's hands trembled on the trigger. Alvarez roared and emptied a full magazine into him, bullets tearing King's body apart in a storm of smoke and dust. But even as the remains hit the ground, the figure reformed behind the fire, stepping through hole again. Alvarez's face twisted, veins standing out on his neck. "God damn you," he screamed, jamming another magazine into place. They came faster now. Jensen appeared next, dragging a dozen skeletal forms behind him like a shepherd of the damned. His eyes glowed green, sockets leaking static. "Help me," he whispered through both mouth and machine. "Don't leave me here." Cole nearly fired, but Alvarez beat him to it, tearing Jensen's chest open with a flurry of shots. The medic's body convulsed and folded into static before dissolving into the swarm. The flames began to falter. Gasoline only burned so long. The tide pressed closer. The outpost walls groaned as the weight of the dead slammed against them. Windows shattered inward, glass spraying across the floor. A skeletal hand clawed through, fingers too long, reaching for Cole's throat. He fired point blank, shattering the arm, but 3 more reached through to replace it. Alvarez roared like a madman, slamming the butt of his rifle against the skeletal faces pressing through his window. Blood streamed down his temple where glass had cut him, but he didn't slow. "They won't take me," he shouted. "Do you hear me? I'm not theirs." The ground itself began to hum. Low, steady, like the drone of a generator buried beneath the desert. Cole felt it in his teeth, in his skull. The deep voice came again, rising from beneath their feet. "You opened the way. Echo is ours." The floor split down the middle with a sharp crack, a jagged seam ripping across the hut. Sand poured upward through the gap, swirling in a cyclone that stank of rust and rot. Cole stumbled back, eyes wide. "Sarge, we can't hold this. We have to run." Alvarez didn't answer. He was laughing now, high and broken, unloading his rifle into the swirling dark. "Come on, you bastards. Come on." The cyclone thickened, taking shape. Something tall. Something vast. Its outline bent and broke, edges flickering like static. A face began to form out of the sandstorm, half skull, half signal, mouth yawning wide. Cole's heart seized. This wasn't just a swarm. It wasn't just Jensen or King. This was all of them. Every voice, every soldier Echo had ever swallowed, bound together into something larger. Something ancient. The mouth opened wider. The radio shrieked, bursting with sparks, voices overlapping until they became one. Echo. Follow. The sound shattered the remaining glass, tore the hinges off the door, buckled the roof supports. Alvarez dropped to his knees, laughing and sobbing at once. "We're already dead," he gasped. "We've been dead since the first transmission." Cole grabbed him, shaking hard. "No. Not yet, we can still get out." But Alvarez's eyes were wide and distant. He tore free, stumbling toward the cyclone. His mother's voice bled from the static, soft and tender. "Come home, hijo." "Alvarez, no." Cole screamed. But the sergeant didn't stop. He walked straight into the storm. And vanished. Cole was alone. The cyclone towered over him, screaming with the voices of every man Echo had ever taken. The walls buckled, the roof sagged. The outpost was collapsing around him. He grabbed his rifle, heart pounding, tears streaming down his dust-caked face. And ran. Out the shattered door, across the sand, into the endless desert night. Behind him, the outpost groaned one final time, then caved in on itself with a roar. The generator died, the flames guttered out, and the last thing Cole heard before the silence took hold was the chorus of voices whispering in perfect unison. "You'll never leave." The desert swallowed him. Cole ran until his legs gave out, collapsing into the sand, chest heaving, lungs burning. The night was cold now, cruelly cold, the heat of the day gone in an instant. He pressed his face into the grit, trying to quiet his breathing, ears straining for pursuit. Silence. Then, faintly, the static. It wasn't from a radio. It was in the air itself, thin, high-pitched, threading through the dunes like wind carrying broken signals. Cole pushed himself up, scanning the horizon with wide, frantic eyes. Nothing. But he knew better. The voices would come again. By dawn, his throat was raw from thirst, his uniform crusted with sweat and blood. He staggered toward the shadow of a ridge, sand burning under his boots. He had no compass, no map. Only the endless expanse. And then he saw it. Half buried in the side of the ridge, almost invisible in the shifting sand, stood another door. Rusted steel. Heavy bolts. Identical to the one in the first bunker. Cole froze, bile rising in his throat. His whole body screamed to turn away. But he stumbled closer, drawn despite himself. The bolts were already undone. The door hung slightly ajar, wind whistling faintly from within. The static grew louder. Cole pressed a trembling hand against the steel. It was cold. Too cold for the desert sun. He pushed it open. Inside was a narrow stairwell, descending into the earth. Dust drifted down the steps, disturbed by no footfall in decades. At the bottom, faint light flickered. Cole descended slowly, rifle raised. His boots crunched on the grit, echoing into the silence. The stairwell opened into a vast chamber, larger than the one he'd seen before. Rows of radio equipment lined the walls, taller, older, connected by thick black cables that disappeared into the stone. Most were silent, their panels dead. But in the center stood a single console, alive, glowing faint green. Cole's breath caught. Dog tags littered the floor around it. Hundreds of them. Rusted, tangled, piled like coins at an altar. The console hummed softly. He stepped closer, knees weak. The screen flickered, static resolving into jagged text. "Welcome back, Echo." Cole staggered back, bile rising. "No," he whispered. "No, I'm not." The console shifted again. "Cole." His chest clenched. "You followed." The radios around the chamber flared to life all at once, voices flooding the air. Jensen's. King's. Alvarez's. Dozens more, overlapping, whispering, pleading, screaming. "Cole, help us." He dropped to his knees, clutching his head, the voices boring through his skull. And then one voice cut through them all, low, steady, vast. "You are ours now." The floor shuddered. The walls rippled like a signal breaking. Figures began to crawl free from the static itself, shapes forming out of nothing, faces he recognized, mouths open in silent screams. Cole raised his rifle, fired wildly. Bullets ripped through them, useless. They flickered and reformed, stepping closer, arms reaching. He backed into the console, heart hammering. His hand brushed against a lever, cold and solid. The screen shifted again. Transmit/receive. Cole stared, panting, realization crashing down. This wasn't just a bunker. It was the source. The heart of it all. The outpost wasn't haunted, it was a beacon. And it had been calling for years. His hands shook. The figures pressed closer, jaws opening, voices rising in the storm. Transmit. 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 Cole gritted his teeth, tears streaking down his dirt-caked face. He slammed the lever down. The chamber screamed. The radios burst into sparks, panels exploding, cables whipping loose like snakes. The figures shrieked, their bodies flickering violently, collapsing into static. The ground shook, cracks splitting across the concrete, sand pouring in. Cole covered his head as the console sparked, green light flooding the room, the word transmit flashing again and again until it burned into his vision. Then everything went white. When he opened his eyes, he was lying in the sand outside the ridge. The sun was high, the desert stretching silent around him. The door behind him was gone, buried under an unbroken wall of dune. No sign of the bunker. No radios. No tags. Only silence. Cole staggered to his feet, dazed. His rifle was gone. His pack was gone. Only the clothes on his back remained. He turned in a slow circle. Nothing but desert. And then, faintly, a sound. Static. From nowhere. From everywhere. He pressed his hands over his ears, but it didn't matter. The voices whispered inside him now. You'll never leave. The desert stretched forever, the horizon quivering in the heat. Cole stumbled forward, sun beating down on his neck, every step sinking into the sand like the earth wanted to pull him under. His tongue was swollen, his lips cracked. The silence of the desert should have been absolute, but the static hummed beneath everything, woven into the air, the ground, even his heartbeat. Cole. He froze, swaying on unsteady legs. The voice was Jensen's again, warm, familiar, wrong. You tried to save me. You almost did. Cole clutched his head. Shut up. Shut up. His voice cracked, dry as stone. You can rest now, came King's voice. Calm. Almost kind. No more fighting. Just follow. He staggered onward, refusing to look back. The outpost was gone now, swallowed whole. He didn't know where he was going, only that if he stopped, if he listened, he'd never rise again. By nightfall, the desert was ice cold. The stars glared sharp overhead, merciless and clear. Cole collapsed on the ridge of a dune, trembling, his breath clouding in the dark. He stared at the sky, wondering if Command even remembered Outpost Echo, if they'd ever send someone out here again. And what they'd find when they did. The static rose again, louder now, curling in his skull like smoke. You'll never leave. It was Alvarez this time. His laugh, rough and tired, bleeding into sobs. You think you're still alive, Cole? Look around. The desert already took you. You're one of us now. No, Cole whispered, his voice cracking. His fingers dug into the sand, nails scraping raw. I'm still here. The sand beneath him shifted. Moved. A hand reached up, skeletal, gray flesh clinging to it in tatters. It grabbed his ankle, cold as stone. Another hand followed, gripping his calf. A body began to pull itself free from the dune beneath him, half-formed, flickering between Jensen's face and King's and Alvarez's, static crawling across its features. Cole screamed, kicking free, scrambling backward on all fours. But more hands erupted from the sand around him, grasping, reaching, dragging. The whole dune quivered, alive with writhing bodies half buried beneath the surface. Everywhere he looked, faces surfaced. Familiar ones. Their eyes hollow, their mouths moving in perfect sync with the static in his skull. You'll never leave. Cole bolted, sprinting across the dunes, his body screaming with exhaustion. He didn't know how long he ran, minutes, hours, but the desert never changed. Every ridge looked the same. Every star overhead mocked him with its cold light. Finally, in the distance, he saw it. A light. Faint, blinking. His chest surged with hope, raw and painful. A radio tower, rising crooked from the sand, its red beacon pulsing faintly against the night sky. He stumbled toward it, legs barely holding. At the base of the tower sat a shack. Small, square, with a single door. He fell against it, slamming it open. Inside was a desk. A chair. And a single radio, humming faintly. The dials glowed green. On the desk lay a logbook. Cole's trembling hands flipped it open. The handwriting inside was his own. Pages and pages of his own scrawl, repeating one phrase over and over until the ink cut grooves into the paper. "You'll never leave." His breath caught. The radio crackled. "Cole." His own voice answered back. "Welcome to Echo." The desert outside was silent again, endless and still. At Outpost Echo, the radio continued to hum. Waiting.